Well, hello YouTube, I'm Cann, and today we got a quick build. So I bought that CNC machine with the laser. You can see there's a link there. Hopefully right about here. We'll see if I can figure that out. But I've been running the crap out of that thing. I like to use it. I'm building stuff. I've got various projects going on in different states where I'm using the laser and whatnot. The problem I've come across is that thing puts off some pretty gnarly fumes. I can't run it out in my shop because I don't have a computer set up out here. I would need the internet, and I don't have that yet. So I'm winding up having to run it in the house, and the fumes are no good. So what we're going to do real quick is we're going to build a shelf and basically make a fume cabinet for this thing to live in. That way I can use it in the house for now until I get set up out here. Without killing myself or somebody else, because that would suck. So that's what we're going to do right now.
Okay, so we've got to cut some wood and sand some things down to get us started. We've got pieces that are going to be the uprights for the fume cabinet, crossbars and whatnot. Some of the stuff needs to be sanded. It's pretty rough. Most of this is recovered wood. Pallets, different things from remodeling projects and whatnot that weren't used. So kind of keeps the cost down on the project, which is nice. So the idea I had for this was to make it pretty tall. That way I don't have to bend over to get into the cabinet while I'm working with the laser. The uprights are going to be about 5 feet tall, and then I measured this thing out to be about 30 inches across, and I wanted a depth of about 26 inches. It gives me lots of room for the engraver to sit in there. I don't have to worry about if I get a bigger one, maybe it'll still fit in this. Either way, it gives me lots of room to put material in there. I basically just built two of these end pieces that are exactly the same. Next, I'm going to cut some 2x4s to go across in here. These are going to be what actually supports our shelving in the fume cabinet. So, well, it's nice to be able to use the reclaimed lumber because it's cheap. The problem with it is it tends to be pretty brittle. So if you just go, putting screws into it, sometimes it'll split. I'm a big fan of pre-drilling most of the stuff for these kinds of projects just because of that. So what I'm doing right now is putting in the supports for a lower shelf. That'll be a good spot for storage and whatnot. About waist high is where I'm going to put the supports for the engraver to sit on. So that way it's, high enough I don't have to bend over once again. Because nobody wants to see me bend over. Nobody. Of course, we got to measure this thing up. We want to make sure that everything is the same height. Don't want it to be crooked. And then we can go ahead and mount the other supports to the 2x4s just like this. And this is a little better view of the frame of the fume cabinet. Something like this when you're building it doesn't look too sturdy when you're putting it together because the wood is kind of thin or whatnot. But really, something like this gets a lot of structural stability when you go ahead and put the siding on it. And when we get the sides on this thing, it will turn out to be pretty stout. Okay, so now we're going to cut some plywood to make the shelves for our cabinets. Once again, this is all scrap plywood. It doesn't have to be pretty, it just has to be functional. The gist of what I'm doing is I cut it to the proper length and I'm going to lay it into the cabinet. That way I can mark it according to how wide I need the pieces to be, and then just trim them down so that they fit in there nice and tight. And we screw everything down and then basically just repeat the process to make the second shelf where the engraver will sit. Excellent, it's starting to look like we built a thing. Okay, so at this point we want to go ahead and cut more plywood to make the back of the cabinet.
Okay, so this thing won't work unless I have a fan in it. So I went to my local hardware store and I bought this tiny little fan. And it unscrews, you can see, focus, you can see it unscrews there. And I think the gist of it is I can take it apart and mount it onto the plywood on this thing right up here on the top corner. So what I'm going to do right now is kind of mark a spot about here and here on this piece of plywood. Right here and right here. And that's about where I want the fan to go in there. So let's see what happens next.
Fortunately, I own a giant hole saw and was able to cut a hole in our plywood that was, basically exactly the right size for this fan to sit in nice and snug. And a couple screws to hold the back of this thing together.
There's what we got going so far. A storage shelf down there. I can probably put my camera equipment down there and stuff for the router. That's where the fan's gonna go. Should fit perfect. Let's check it. Just like that. I don't think I can sit there and blow the smoke out of there would be perfect. Okay. Cottage cheese container fits perfectly right there. Gives me something to attach my ducting to. And the fan can go right over top of it, just like that. So that's what we're gonna do next.
I drilled a couple holes in the cottage cheese carton. That way I could put a couple little screws in it to hold it in place while I was doing all this. And then just mounted the fan over top of it in the back of our cabinet.
Let's see if it blows. Nice.
I went ahead and used a little bit of black silicone to just seal everything up and kind of help hold the cottage cheese carton in place. Alright, time to put a lid on our box. So I wanted to be able to look in there and see what's going on when the machine is running. We've got a couple pieces of acrylic that I'm cutting up. Acrylic is pretty easy to work with, really. You can cut it with a table saw or a skill saw, drill holes in it, and then screw it to whatever you're working with. And as you can see, this gave us a nice viewport to be able to look in the top of this thing and see what's going on. Just cut a piece of plywood to go in behind it, screw it all down. Time to put sides on the cabinet. So this is 1/8 inch plywood that I got at the local hardware store. They were basically just going to throw it away, so I went ahead and put it in my truck and hauled it home. Now it's going to do the job for this project. Cut it to size and screw it onto the cabinet. It doesn't have to support anything, so it doesn't have to be really sturdy or stout. Alright, I want to take a second to point something out here. This doesn't have to be airtight. The idea is for the fan to draw air through this, so you actually want some gaps in your wood, especially towards the bottom and in the front of this thing, because the fan in the back needs to be able to pull the air back to it. And that way you evacuate the fumes, and you know it's got to have somewhere for the air to come from to start with. And I'm attaching the second piece of acrylic to the top of the front of the cabinet. Once again, good viewport so I can see what's going on with this thing closed up. And then we need to build a door for the lower portion of the front of this. A piece of plywood that I cut, and I'm going to double up where I put the hinges, make sure there's enough wood to, get some screws in there and make sure that everything is sturdy. Wanted this thing to be able to swing open so that I could kind of use it as a shelf. So that's what we're shooting for here. And mounting the door to the cabinet, this is one of those places where pre-drilling your holes is a really good idea and can save you a lot of hassle. I pre-drilled and was able to just kind of hand start the screws, and that made it to where I didn't have to fight with the stupid thing, which was really nice. Looks like it opens and closes nicely, so that's good. Of course, we need a way to latch this shut, and what was really convenient for me was that the little base that came with our fan looked like the perfect situation for this. I was able to cut a piece off of it and more or less just attach it to the side of the cabinet, screw a little eyelet into the door, and then I had a latch that was halfway pre-built, and it worked out really well. So like I said before, I want to be able to use the door as a shelf when it's open. So in order to keep it from falling open too far, what I've done is put a couple eyes in the cabinet and the door, and then I've got this piece of chain that I cut, and I'm going to take some pliers, open up the ends of it, and then, kind of wrap everything back around itself to hold this in place. That way it's got something to limit how far the door will open and kind of support it if I put stuff on it.
Alright, this is the thing we built. This little door here isn't really to keep fumes in there, because we've got a big gap here. It's more or less just to keep the laser from blinding me while I'm sitting there. I can sit down at this level and work, and it's not flashing me in the eyes. Got our latch holds it. Got a little chain there to keep it from falling open too far on the door. Looks pretty good. We got, can't see because it's dark there. Got a little bit of gap here, and a little bit of gap up here on the top. But the reality is that if I find that there's too much gap and we're losing some, I can go back and seal it up with tape, put duct tape on it or something. Got a little hole here for our cords to go in. Everything in the back sealed up. There's our fan. Now I need to get it into the house. Yeah. Okay, got it in the house and got the machine sitting in there. The next thing to do is plumb our fan ducting from here to out the window.
So setting up the ducting is pretty easy. I'm going to use this 4-inch dryer tubing. It's just this aluminum tubing. It's nice and flexible. And we're basically just going to duct tape it to the cottage cheese carton and then run it out the window. You cut off the extra, and the nice thing about this is that I can open and close the window and keep the weather out.
Laser is going. Doesn't make a lot of smoke, but it's enough to be a problem for sure. We're trying to hang out inside while this thing's going. We'll let this run for a few minutes and I'll let you know how it works. I've got my stream light, and I don't know if you guys will be able to see it. There's quite a bit of smoke in this cabinet. That fan is doing a pretty good job of sucking it out of there. I can see the smoke. I don't know if you guys can. Yeah, right there. See it? See all that smoke? And it is actually flowing to the fan. If you go over here, do the same thing. Focus on it. It's blowing it out of there. It's kind of hard to see it. There. I think you can see it there. But it's working. It's doing what it's supposed to do. I'm not gonna lie, I am super excited that this works. I was kind of doubtful about my fan and whatnot, but it's doing the job, and that's pretty awesome. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. You are awesome. Thank you. Do me a favor, right about here somewhere, I'm gonna put my face so you can subscribe to the channel if you would please. And over in here somewhere, on the other side of my face, a video that YouTube has picked for you to watch. Hopefully it's something you like. And remember, if I can build it, so can you.